left Seagirt, they left on horseback. So they were basically on horseback most of their time, and just traveling through the rural areas of the state of New Jersey, and so wherever we could pay rent for them to stay. In the beginning, that's where they went. Right. As time went on, we did build barracks, and troopers did stay and live in the barracks up until 1970. About 1977 was the last year that they stayed in the barracks, and they ate, slept, and worked out of the barracks.
Very interesting.
And these are just some training photos from from recruits in the academy through time. Some of the things we still do, of course, we still do the range. We don't have the motorcycles anymore, but we do still box in our academy. That hasn't changed. And the class that's going into 119 class, that'll be starting up sometime at the end of this summer, will also be boxing. That's something that we've continued throughout the years, the boxing portion.
These guys seem like they're having way too much fun at this.
I don't think they're having that much fun, sir. And just again, academy training. Probably just a scenario down there on the arrest procedures and how to place somebody under arrest, but just some more, history of the state police and the state police academy at that time. These are the academy classes that have gone through. In fact, my class is down here, the 101st class. In 1984, I graduated. But if you look at the basic uniforms, actually they haven't changed since 1921. They've kind of stayed the same, going, except for maybe the bow ties that they had for a short period of time in the early 30s. But basically the same. The blouse is a class 1958 compared to my class in 1984. If you look at the blouses, they're exactly the same. Only thing different, the boots and breeches maybe, which we did away with.
And the only real difference there is the municipal class that's down on the bottom.
At the very bottom. We also train in our academies at that time, and we are still training at our academies up at Seagirt.
Yeah, many officers from people at home may not realize that many officers in municipal police departments are trained at the State Police Academy, and even the ones who don't initially go there often, very often return to the State Police Academy. I've probably been back there 8 or 9 times in my 23 years. All for advanced training in different areas.
Yeah, my father was worked for the municipality Cherry Hill Township, and he had also went to Seagirt. So you're correct in that. And the advanced courses are held at Seagirt that many of the police officers go to now in the state of New Jersey.
As we're walking through, folks will probably notice folks in the background. There's actually a class, I guess, that came through for
the Lindbergh.
Yes.
For the Lindbergh exhibition. Mr. Falzini spoke to him earlier, and he's the historian here. He's quite familiar with the case.
Yeah, years ago, I think, as I mentioned to you, we had one of the guys who was in the museum come to our studio, and we had a short talk about the museum. We couldn't fit all the stuff in the car, though, so we didn't have that many objects from there. But many people know about the Lindbergh case, and they see it time and time again in the history shows, and even with the passing of the millennium, people were seeing all sorts of historical shows about the crime of the century and things. So as soon as they clear out, I'm sure we'll look at some of the displays over there, but it's also very interesting. Now, is this more up to date?
This is more up to date. This is the uniform that we're wearing today. Of course, the blouse. Now we don't carry no longer a nightstick. It's a PR-24. We have the new weapon that we've been carrying since actually 1980, about 1983. I came in 84, and I was the first class that went through learning on the. It had on the H&K or Heckler and Couch 9mm. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, we had Ruger's revolvers. This is just some memorabilia from days gone by for the state police. Up at the top, you see it's the old Troop A headquarters. It was actually out of a hotel in Hamilton. But now we're just items that have been collected over the years that troopers had or we had up here in storage that we brought out and we placed into the museum. Different hat badges that we've had over the years. Actually, there's always had a triangle but it's standard issued. And of course, there's a chaplain's hat badge with the cross, and the little badge was for the Stetson, and retired badge, the very bottom gold that we receive when we retire. Of course, there's a helmet there, a motorcycle for the goggles.
I'm afraid I don't know how much protection that would actually give you if all in all.
I don't think it'd give you any protection at that time. But like I said, it's part of our history. We're proud of it, real proud of it. It makes us who we are. And like I said, it's usually very impressive for even young troopers, or even bringing somebody up here who's interested in becoming a trooper and walking them through and showing them some of our state police history, because they're not familiar with us. And once they become familiar with us and see that we have a lot of pride in our history, they kind of get enthused and get pumped up in hopes to get into this process, into our process to continue on and become a trooper and become part of our history. Like I said, every trooper gets his own badge number. That's unique. So
yes, and many places have continued that tradition, as with even New York City. Some of the people who watch the shows all the time know my grandfather was a cop in New York City, walked a beat for years and years, and that badge number, actually if I became a cop in New York City, I could take over his badge number, which was an interesting thing. However, the state police, my department, we do the same thing, but that was started by, I think, Chief Tannum a couple of chiefs ago at our outfit, and it promotes the sense of history and oneness. And it's certainly several of the officers from my department, when I was talking about coming up here, including my chief, Chief Swanek, said, gee, you know, he wished he wasn't so busy because he wanted to come with me to look around. So it's certainly a nice thing, and I've enjoyed everything we've seen so far, and there's plenty more. So I won't interrupt you anymore. Let's go right ahead.
It's just some of the weapons that have been issued over our history, starting with the 38 caliber Colt, and Smith & Wessons we've carried at one time, Rugers. Of course, some of the weapons you see, the Thompson submachine gun, AR-15, which we still have. We don't keep at the barracks anymore. But when I came in 1984, once a year we had to be familiar with it, and we'd go to the range and shoot that. And
so the teams guys basically...
The teams guys they're into new weaponry. I'm not real familiar with the new one, but they're no longer. I think matter of fact, they're with the H&K, with the MP5s now, so they've even updated. But we do still have these around, the AR-15s.
Great. Now, the winter coat, do they still...
That's the old winter coat. Now we have what's called a cruiser coat. It's a mid-length coat. It's no longer a long overcoat, which in 1984, when I came in, we had went to the cruiser coat, in fact. And it's a little more comfortable. They're a lot sharper, though, the longer coats.
I wouldn't mind getting a hold of a 60 Plymouth with all the markings on it.
Of course, Marine Police had came under us for many years as a separate bureau. Now they're no longer. Now what happened was they were merged into the state police. They're now troopers, and now that we have troopers out on the water. Of course, New Jersey is surrounded by water, and there are many large lakes throughout the state, and that's their function. They go out and enforce the rules on the waterways in and around the state of New Jersey.
Now, whereas the folks are probably familiar with the Coast Guard, who actually mostly deal with the waters that lead into international water areas, but the State Police Marine Bureau deals with either inland waterways or waterways.
Yeah, certain lakes within the state of New Jersey that are large. The Delaware, they're out in the Delaware River. They're in Delaware Bay. They're out of Atlantic City, and all the way up the coast, you'll find.
Oh yeah, sure. Shark River and.
You're fine. There's
further north in Shrewsbury.
They're no longer Marine Bureau. It's no longer Marine Bureau. Now they're troopers, like I said. In fact, they were F Troop or Troop F up until the last couple months, and now they've actually been merged in each one of the troops. So now they're, Troop A, Troop C, and Troop B have merged in the stations or the barracks that the Marine Police were working out of. So
now the same kind of thing happened with years ago with the motor vehicle.
Yeah, prior to
inspector?
1984, they were merged into the state police.
So basically, there's one unified agency providing statewide.
Yes.
Very good.
And just special times, special services that have occurred in our history.
That's oh, okay.
Yeah, this, for instance, the Hindenburg disaster. In this one here, King and Queen of England, hurricane.
Wow. And an escaped elephant?
Actually, no, it was dropped out. Dropped out the bottom of a truck.
Must have been an interesting report on that call.
And of course, I wasn't at the time, but I remember my father being involved with the riots that occurred in the late 60s. Majority of them being up in Newark.
Yeah, Newark Plainfield. And around 1970 in Asbury Park.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't on the job then, obviously. I was too young, but I was actually worked in a sandwich shop in Asbury Park, so I fed a lot of troopers.
And just some more photographs from our history. Been taken and found.
Wow.
Old teletype machine, which I don't remember it being used. That was before my time.
Well, I actually remember these, and it took a long time, and somebody had to key punch everything in. And for the folks at home, this is the predecessor to the modern computer system, which we actually may get a chance to look at a little later. But the teletype was the main method of communication between probably the different units and the different barracks, and also the different local police agencies. But I'm sure that this contraption, when it was new, was quite expensive, so not everybody could afford one. But back in the days when they started this, the radios in the cars weren't quite up to the levels they are now. So, as I said, they depended on teletypes to ferret out information to all law enforcement agencies. Now, the interesting thing is here that I think we'll talk about later too is that the state police are basically the guardians of the criminal justice information system and NCIC computers that run within the state of New Jersey, which is an awesome responsibility. They have what they call terminal agency coordinators, which we'll go into later, but I happen to be that for our agency.
I was that for one of our barracks, town officer.
And it's a lot of training and a lot of responsibility, but it speaks to the security of the system, how well it's maintained, and the controls that are put on it by the state police. And it makes all the sense in the world. But as I said, we'll take that on later.
We're talking about the old radios here, some of the old radios here. In 1984, we were using these when I first came in, the General Electric. Now we're using their Motorola's that work off a microwave. We're using now predominantly now. They're good.
And we even have a Vascor radar, which was an old. Now these radios, and we had these when I started too. They were tube radios, so you had to wait for them to warm up. So if you turned them off in your car and you got out, you had to wait a good couple of minutes before you could say anything. Now it's basically instant on, and even with our hand radios, we have the ability to have almost as much range with the repeaters and such around. And actually, we're standing in a toll booth, I guess. Did they swipe this from the parkway or the? I don't know that actually a car could fit through the middle of it.
And aviation unit, public safety, but that's our aviation unit, comes under emergency management. Right now, there are 28 troopers that are pilots in our aviation unit with the helicopters. They do the medevacs, North Star, South Star. They're also doing some of the patrols up around Newark as far as the stolen cars searches, and chases. They're also we also have a fixed wing that they use every once in a while, but that's an up and growing unit within the state police, the aviation unit. Maybe we'll get a key first for this, get this out the way. Breathalyzer unit. Breathalyzer unit still used in the state of New Jersey. I know a lot of other states have gone to the new laser units for breathalyzer. They measure the content of alcohol in somebody's blood, but we're still using breathalyzers in the state of New Jersey, and that's probably due to the fact that we have had such great case law in the state of New Jersey that it would be kind of tough for us to get away from. Of course, the state police in the state of New Jersey do the only training, and we do the training and train all law enforcement officers throughout the state in the breathalyzer unit. We also go around and periodically check all breathalyzer units throughout the state of New Jersey for the local departments as well as the state police stations to make sure that they're in proper working order. The state police also has a task of also doing all refresher courses for all law enforcement agencies within the state of New Jersey for the police officers to be refreshed and keep them updated in the new case laws, and also see if they're proficient with the breathalyzer.
And you know, that makes all the sense, especially in a training type atmosphere, to have one agency doing the training. It keeps it consistent. And therefore, there's no, you know, you're not going to 6 different places where you're getting 6 different stories. You're going to one place for training. Everybody's taught the same thing. When you need to in court, you can produce the results of their tests in the class, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes all the sense in the world. I know some folks are looking at, is it Intoxilyzer? I'm not sure if that's the other machine that...
the new laser.
Yeah.
I think they're out, but I think they're in certain areas. They put them in just to see as a trial.
Sure.
But I think the biggest thing, my understanding is the case law.
Yeah.
It's building up new case law, but Jersey has a real good case law.
As we continue here, Sarge, we're kind of moving a little quicker, but you know, actually I need one of those. Remember that snowstorm a couple of years ago where the snow was like 36 inches? I would have paid big bucks for one of those things right about then. And emergency management areas. Now they have a crime scene that they actually have a mock-up of over here, and I guess they explain to the people that come through what kind of work is done at a crime scene.
Yeah, actually, the museum's geared on a self-guided tour. Mm-hmm. Everything's self-explanatory. All you do is hit the button, starts the monitor, and it'll go through the whole scene and a scenario as to what occurred in a crime up until the detectives showing up and the crime scene investigators coming in to collect evidence from the scene. And pretty much the kids have to sit here and they figure out who did it. One knows who done it.
Well, that's pretty nice. And also we have many other, it's kind of a, as you said, a self-done tour, but also the things that you can touch and feel. I see a bullet comparator or a couple of microscopes hooked to different rounds so you can see the lands and grooves and things. And also a section on technology and photography and...
Fingerprinting and photography, crime scene investigation, crime analysis. And what it does, kids can come in and it's a hands-on for them. They go through and they can play with whatever they want to play with as long as they don't break it. And they leave here with a little bit of our history. Of course, we've got gambling machines that have been, we've confiscated in the past. Of course, our drug interdiction units and our troopers are doing a great job on their highways interdicting drugs. Composite sketch. We have composite sketch artists in the state of New Jersey for the state police, and they're well known throughout the state. And in fact, have been asked to go and assist Pennsylvania State Police on the border with a couple of their cases when it came to composite drawing. Of course, our arson unit, bomb squad, is well known throughout the state. And missing persons unit. And some of the wanted for escape, Joanna Chesmar, who we know killed Trooper Forrester back in the early 70s who still want it, and she's down at this time in Cuba hiding under Castro.
Yeah.
You know, she's still on our #1 list, and we'd like to get her back here to serve her time out for that.
As a matter of fact, actually, the NCIC 2000 demo that I saw, Joanne Jusmore's, I think her fingerprints picture, everything comes up on the computer, which is going to be a real boon to the scientific end of teletypes and such in our computer system.
And here we have Trooper Mario Runco. He was the first trooper to go up in space, actually on one of the shuttle missions. But he was a trooper. I graduated out of the 93rd A class, and he, you know, left us and went into entered the Navy in 1978.
Here we have, I guess, a bunch of confiscated weapons, a whole case full of them.
And these are just some of the weapons that have been confiscated by all different types of law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And we just an example of the kind of weapons that are out there today, and that you know, the type of job that all law enforcement officers are doing in the state of New Jersey in taking illegal guns off of citizens and off our highways and from people who don't deserve to have them.
Well, Sarge, we've gotten back to the Lindbergh area, and maybe you can explain some of the exhibits we see here.
Some of these exhibits are from the trial itself, evidence from the case, and of course Lindbergh had a young child that was kidnapped. It was believed that Bruno Richard Hauptmann was involved. In fact, he was executed. Over to our far right, there's an electric chair, the exact chair that he was electrocuted in for the crime. But the Lindbergh case was a pretty big case to us. Like you had mentioned earlier, this was in fact picked to be the crime of the century, the Lindbergh case. Lindbergh was a well-known aviator, crossed the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, and was well known throughout the world. He was an international hero, and people revered him. So when this occurred, of course, everybody were up in arms and got involved.
Now, even the famous ladder, which is actually seems to have been modified to be collapsible, somewhat, was a big part of the case, as was the clothing that the Lindbergh child wore, etc. It's actually a step back in history, but a big part of the science of this case was matching the wood from the ladder up to the, I guess, the attic rafters, or the
I believe it was the garage.
The floor. Oh, okay.
That they matched the wood up to. But yeah, we have a historian. He's real. It would be Mark Falzini, and a Sergeant Davis, Jack Davis. They're both well versed in Lindbergh kidnapping, and they could, if any questions anybody would have, that's who they would ask. They would ask those two. I just have the basics, but they're the experts. They could tell you a lot more that was involved in this case, in solving this case, and in their belief why Hauptmann was, in fact, executed for it and was involved in it. I know there are naysayers that come through here every once in a while that go through our archives in the back that don't believe. They believed he was framed, and that he didn't do it.
Well, I think with any major case like that, even with the Kennedy assassination and things like that, there are always people who will never be satisfied whatever happened, and not that all of them are always wrong, but especially long after the case, sometimes it's easy to pick apart little pieces. And as many cases I've been involved in, especially homicide cases, sure, you know, you could look through a case and see, oh, gee, maybe they should have done this, maybe should have, but when you actually work, certainly, yeah. So it's very interesting. And Now, obviously, they don't use an electric chair in New Jersey anymore, but and I don't think they've actually executed anybody in New Jersey in an awful long time. But the manner now is supposed to be death by lethal injection. But that's still, most of the cases that were set up for that are still in appeal, so that's still a long ways off probably. But there is an awful lot of stuff here, and I guess you have all the evidence from these cases.
Yes, they do. And we've got more evidence in the back that we don't let out just because they're so fragile, and documents that we have that we don't give out, that will let the public see because they can't be in light because they're so sensitive and fragile.
Well, and as with all homicide evidence in New Jersey, it's kept forever. So that whatever evidence there is of this case will always be here or somewhere. It'll be stored for all time. So it's pretty interesting. Well, we're actually in a hallway here, Sarge, between the more modern portion of the museum and heading towards the log cabin portion. And this hallway here has special meaning to all state troopers and all officers anywhere in New Jersey.
Yes, sir. This is this hallway is dedicated, like I said earlier, the museum is built around this hallway. But this hallway is dedicated to the troopers who have made the ultimate sacrifice in their career. Troopers who have died in the line of duty within the state of New Jersey from the state police. The first couple plaques we have here are actually a State Police Distinguished Service Medal, and also Trooper of the Year goes in this hallway. We put their new pictures up every year for the troopers that make Trooper of the Year. But like I said, the ultimate sacrifice. So this is in tribute of all the men before me, and since I've been in the state police, that have died in the line of duty. Many of them car accidents, motorcycle, one plane. Approximately 11 of them were actually murdered.
Now, these are the pictures that go with the names that we saw on the triangular monument out front, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, they are. And of course, we talked about, so it said Joanne Chesmar and Trooper Forrester. Right here. Of course, Phil LaMonaco is up here. Of course, Manning and Williams we did catch back in the early portion of the 80s. Up until Trooper Scott Gonzalez, who was the last trooper who died in the line of duty, was murdered in 1997. And it shows you the Memorial Garden outside, and how it works out is all you do is you come in to see your loved one, or if you want to see where a trooper, former trooper, has been laid to rest, you have to do is come in here and look up the number, look at the key, and find the number, and go out to the memorial.
Very interesting. Now, this area here is the actual log cabin.
This is the log cabin, yes, sir.
And nice place.
Very nice, very nice. I don't know if it was so nice for the recruits when they were up here. But
Did they actually turn on the fireplace when the recruits here?
Yes, the fireplaces still do work, in fact. They probably had to start and stoke the fire themselves and build it, but we do have gas. We turn it on for special occasions that we have here. But like I had said before, what happened when the recruits did everything in here. Ate, slept, did their class work. They just moved their bunks to the side, and then they would do their class work, whatever training, and then they would, right out back, they would shoot. If you look out the front windows where the parking lot is, it was just actually just all pasture. That's where the horses were kept. That's where they, we used to have rodeos on the day of graduation, where they would go and they would show different skills that they've learned while they were in the academy. But things have changed now. I mean,
just a little.
Just a little bit. Of course, here's a 1921 Harley Davidson motorcycle, which would have been the issued motorcycle at that time when the troopers left. Which at that time would have been Seeger when they went out on patrol. Of course, we had many more horses at that time than we had motorcycles, but there were not too many roads in the South Jersey portion of Jersey.
That's for sure.
And here's this 1930 Buick, which was originally one of our state patrol cars, state police cars. Was purchased from a dealership in Hamilton. After we were done with it, they purchased it back, and then they donated to us to bring up here, and we had it painted the blue and gold. Of course, it wasn't blue and gold then. It was probably just all black. That's the only color you get.
Yeah.
And this is the last issued motorcycle. It's in the 1948 Harley Davidson. We stopped using motorcycles in 1954. We came off of them. But this would have been the last issued.
Wow. It's very interesting. And, hey, we have a little store here, Kev, so we can bring back goodies. Hi, ladies. How are you? And another fireplace, because it's always cold in the cabin. And blackboards that they kept the scores on, I guess, for
shooting.
Yeah. Very interesting. And the range office, I guess.
Range office. And it's just to give you an idea, like I said, up until 1976, 77, we slept in from 1921 up to 1976, 77. Troopers actually stayed at the barracks. And this just to give you an idea what a hotel room may have looked at, or at one of the barracks. You normally were 2 beds in the barracks in a room with these bureaus. And that's where the troopers spent their days. They go home every 4 days. With their families, but the rest of the time they were in the barracks. And of course, we have some pictures here of the classes in the academy. And like I said earlier, here they are. They're having class. They have an inspection. Their bunks are out. They just move them out the way at the end. Typing, which still occurs. They set out the back portion, which would be here. And out this way was a firing range. So it was self-contained at that time, like I said, 1935, and when they completed it.
Wow. Very interesting. Well, basically, that brings us up to the more modern patrol vehicle that the troopers use.
Yes, that's a 1991 Chevy.
Mm-hmm.
Getting this closer up to date. Of course, there's a saddle here from one of the troopers. Like I said, mounted patrol in it in 1938, and everybody was either on horses at that time, or off of horses, or in cars, or in motorcycles by that time.
Well, I'll tell you what, Sergeant Burton, I appreciate the time you took out to show us through the museum here. Hopefully, we're going to get a chance to sneak over to where the APHIS unit is for a couple of minutes. That'll be when we return here on NJLaw. But especially for me and my guest, I want to thank you for taking the time out. I really appreciate it. We kind of come on short notice and run through, but it was, as I said, very informative and probably a good day visit for anybody. I mean, you're right here near the Delaware-Raritan Canal, is that?
Well, you're by the Delaware-Raritan Canal, but also right down the road, further down the road, if you take 29, Washington's Crossing. Mm-hmm. So actually, you can make a day out of it. This is free. We don't charge anybody. You come in, bring your kids, and of course, and in those cases where you just come in, you decide to stop by. Like I said, it's a self-guided tour. There's placards on everything you can read. There's also the monitors. Just push the button, and you learn a lot about our state police history here. You're also going to bring large groups, and we actually speak to them in large groups in the log cabin. We set up chairs and speak to a large group whenever they want to come up on anything that has to do with the state police.
There certainly is a lot of history here, and actually the whole state of New Jersey, that people probably miss because they don't know what's available. So I'd recommend it to folks to stop up here, stop at Washington Crossing. You can even go up further into, if you like antiques, I guess Lawrenceville and some of those areas.
Right up here at 29. Yes,
and then cross over into New Hope if you want to visit Pennsylvania a little bit. It'd be a real nice trip. But once again, thank you.
No problem.
And stay tuned, folks, because we're going to go over to the unit that the AFIS, which is Automated Fingerprint Identification System is here in Trenton, and it should be very interesting. Stay tuned. Hi, welcome back to NJLaw. We're here with Sergeant Tom Robinson, who is in the Records and Identification and Section AFIS.
Yes.
You're going to have to tell me exactly which unit it is. And he's going to explain to us some of the technology that's available today, fingerprint-wise. It helps law enforcement officers in making not only identifications, but also fingerprinting people without ink and some of the things that are new to us. So, Tom, that was a whole lot of words, and I appreciate you took time out of your schedule to be with us. But maybe you'll probably start in live scan land and take us from there. In what people are used to watching TV is watching police officers, everybody gets ink on their fingers and gets fingerprint cards, and then what happens with them, probably nobody's really sure that may be watching this show. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an idea of what happens there, and I'll leave it to you.
Well, traditionally on inked fingerprint cards, when a person commits a crime, it takes most police departments anywhere from 5 to 10 days to get us the cards. We process those fingerprint cards internally, and then we're required to forward them to the FBI by law. And what happens in a lot of cases with inked fingerprint cards, known criminals are accidentally released because it takes approximately, I'll say 2 months to deal with an inked card to get it through the state and federal system on an inked card. And what we have here around us, if you'll look, just take a look at the room, people are actually processing inked fingerprint cards. These are applicant cards and criminal cards. We process approximately 160,000 inked cards per year on the criminal side, and we'll probably do about 170,000 applicant cards as well. Traditionally, inked cards are very good for us. We have over 7 million inked cards on file, but that's a little difficult to manually search. So what we have here in New Jersey is a system called AFIS, the Automated Fingerprint Identification System. To really summarize it, what would have taken one person roughly, I'd say, about 150 years to search in our archives, these machines can now do in less than 30 minutes.
Wow.
So if the person has a record in the state, normally within about 30 minutes or so, we'll find that particular individual. So it doesn't matter what name they use, what date of birth, the fingerprints are all unique to the individual. But technology is changing. If we go over here, I'll show you something called a live scan machine. This is a live scan fingerprinting machine, and this is how we prefer to capture fingerprints now. If you'll take a look, all I have to do is hit the scan, roll the finger across the scanner, and hit the save button. What this does, it electronically captures that fingerprint, and you can do this for all of the fingers. So as opposed to the record coming to us through the mail, which is normally 2 to 3 days in U.S. mail, these prints can be electronically transmitted to us. We'll take a look over here on the other side of the room, and I'll show you how we electronically process fingerprint cards.
Now, Tom, the machine there, the live scan, also seems to be able to figure out which fingers you're putting on there so that you don't inadvertently get the fingers out of sequence?
The machine has what we call slap-to-roll comparison. Once you put the 4 flat fingers down and the thumbs down flat, then you have to roll the fingers on the card.
Sure.
And it compares the images so that if the operator makes a mistake, the machine will tell you, you've made a mistake. That finger's in the wrong position. Please re-roll it.
Well, and what's great about that is for years I've obviously rolled fingerprints, but if you did or somebody did make a mistake with that, by the time